maybe 10 minutes behind schedule. I'd like to welcome Dr. Herbert Abrams here. It's great to see you, Herb. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll hear from Bob Gibbs after a short break. We have plenty of snacks and goodies. And dziękuję.
Yeah. I think I have about 5 minutes.
I'll talk to him. My son is 30 minutes.
Okay, 30 minutes.
I have a conversation.
Because people will talk a lot.
Think about the
I'll do my best.
Yes, because that's where all the money is. My project is just investors.
The only other one is that real
I'll go and take the Russian is new. Yeah, well, we're really lucky that we have this project. This big project. This is just it's basically doing it's just it's gone. It's gone. Now we're also embedding our business in Russia. We're trying to
Well, I'll say what. I'll shoot you a note.
It's one of the biggest Europe. And they've never invested.
It's not his main
What I said.
One more I've just said
that's great. But you also have invest in something which is 6
No, he hasn't told me something. I started in Brazil. Now he's there. Now he's a second. So yeah, and then it's about
and I'm sure it will be reborn somehow. So you're up next, but there's no. So I would not. That's not a. That's not It's possible, but that's a very wild thing because you've got. Well, average people's houses are not very much depressed because there's still huge pressure which is 10 times the price of yeah. So you've got, and not just the whole once you have a million it's the capital region. So normally the apartments are not really high end.
Hi, how you doing, man? Good, thank you.
So you have within radius of 20 kilometers from the there's in 2009, there was no
I don't agree what they're doing. I don't care that I know because there's changes.
And now
Syria is what used to be it's a mess. It's come down to yeah, well, so everybody else. But, and it is a struggle. Whether we want to admit it or not now, I don't know what it was. I have a great deal of suspicion in the Middle East. Anybody telling me they're because usually what they mean is they want it for themselves, but not for anybody.
in Moscow was
So you're,
I would not buy this.
I know. Oh, no. Yes. In the beginning,
we were just talking about real estate.
when they gained independence from the Sunnis, I mean, the only thing,
That's not a
the Sunnis
cycle.
were they're the
You see,
and by the way,
the really long-term
for the
thing
most
is
part, they've always been like,
right, and so you don't know whether
that both Sunni and Shia do not like
time value of money. It comes back 25 years from now. So
one day, because the only job they
make
could
up for
get
the years that
was either a body washer or the
New
army.
York,
One day they woke up and realized, hey,
2009,
we're the army.
2008,
We have the
after the
guns. They
crash.
took over.
You know, those prices fell back.
That's hard to rule it with an iron hand.
No,
They
New
were
York,
owned,
you know
killed about
what
50
son
sons.
drive New York is becoming.
No, but his son,
You see it, you know it, New York.
I know the reason his son was there, so just like
That, that would be an obvious.
you know why his son is there?
Detroit's
Only allowing
time will be
emotional cheese.
But how and by whom
All that
and
there is,
when,
we don't get as a kid.
it's a different kind of investment.
We're gonna fight amongst ourselves. We're gonna be the president.
They, just telling you, it depends on the market. So
That's why
average,
I don't want to, I got this big
have
thing
not.
in Britain. And they said, no, you got to come back. So I did. Yep, and then he really came back. And at first he thought this was okay. And then
Still
he became
doesn't. So the
because the
average
reality is, all of reality
take the entire city.
to me, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm
Take
saying
the
I'm
entire city. Average price of a car. And that's not changing. And there are that's hard to but the high because people
If you could just stay at home, the other thing was, is the son, Uday, were what? I mean, total nut. Well, Uday was he had that who was going to live within 24 hours? I had to die.
I said,
Because he's not taking the most part of
Yeah, Charles, please.
We held together. It's like the, what's his name? Right, yeah. Oh, Tarzan. But Tarzan. Yes, he was at oh, no, I know that.
The restrooms.
except that it's
Myself, really, I was.
That's good. Yeah, I can tell.
Everything is recorded, and it's 7:20. Pretty good.
Right, that's what I'm saying, I agree.
Well, we got at least we got to see
Yes, I do. No, I know. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard, very much a military. And I can say to the thing that bothers me, we have to
had a bad
I do discussions for the first
Oh, well, I rocked like that. I was in his
in the open freaking desert. It's like shooting ducks. Why not?
Now, I think
For 5 people. Trust me, I know them. I mean, I'm there's some things. I don't, because I think, I think, well, let me this way, I will say this, I really think.
already established about 4 United business.
The people of the Democratic Syrian Army or whatever.
It's okay. Yes. Then you come. Yeah, the real
One more minute.
Okay. Just a minute. Okay.
Because it wasn't just Palmyra. But I remember, I stayed there when I was almost as good as Beirut was back in the old days.
But I couldn't do the right
And now, they destroyed everything. They can't no, I'll never understand why they did destroy it. I won't. I'm gonna get up and get my gotta get
Yeah, it sounds we had a bit of a problem there. And it's pretty, it's an angle.
okay. Maybe I'll think I'm crazy. At least I'll think about this, right?
The screen and the speaker.
Hopefully we'll be taking
I've always been curious how she was doing.
Her second language was French,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't believe she would be doing banking.
Yeah, that's true too. I was surprised at that too. But then again, look, I still think that cute little charming little girl who charms you to death. You can ask her if she still has that silver coin in her.
She must have.
Hope so.
She must have.
But it's just one of those things that there's just certain people like you and me, and they just absolutely. Yeah, no, you don't even agree on a lot of things. That's strange.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what friendship is.
That is very serious. I can correct you when you're wrong.
You should be able to.
Too bad I'm never wrong, so you can't correct me. Are you gonna be able to get one?
Yes, it was about
Yeah.
next, right?
Yes. Roman, I want to get started pretty soon with Colonel Bob.
Do I need this here?
Oh, Hall Garden. Oh, he's on the phone right now.
Do I need this here? Like,
Oh,
you need
this is
this
John.
here?
I
Able to project anything.
No, but I mean, can you put it down
Great.
there?
Yes, we.
I don't, the only thing I want is the map. So if you put it up there. 'Cause I need to-
So my apologies for being.
No, I'll do like this is a chart.
Just watch some of the live feed.
Somebody's thinking.
That is excellent. Yes, I think we'll be in very good shape. You did speak with Roman, right? About the only thing I would say, Roman, let's get. Can you work on that later, maybe? Yeah, because we're already about 20 minutes behind. But that's typical. I think for 7:15 p.m. it may realistically be. Although you're actually the second of me, so we'll
I
probably.
don't know why I'm nervous about this. Nervous about what? I don't know.
All right, wonderful. It's great to talk to
Central
you.
Asia, from Central Asia with a little bit of Russia,
And
a little bit of
I'm serious about
Turkey,
coming out to AUP next year.
Georgia.
I mean,
Let's see. Yeah.
You had a great map last time.
I could talk something about.
You'll have a lot of energy.
That's
Talking
true.
about
That's
energy.
true. That's right. That's right.
I think about the Great War.
That is a great map. That right there. Right there.
I like that.
Dilettante scholarship. I've never.
I mean, it may not be accurate, but it's this one here. Yeah.
That's where I think,
Right.
and there's gonna be another
Okay, well,
country,
Paul, great. Thank you for calling.
Right.
right?
What's that?
I think there's gonna be another country here, right in there.
Excellent.
No.
Okay, you take
Put another one in.
Not for a long time, unless something happens really strange. I'll tell you what.
All right.
As you see here, you tell me there's going to be another 5 countries here, and I'll okay. Yeah, I won't be surprised. I mean, it's,
There will
it's a
be-
strange world.
There will be plenty of time for more conversation at lunch.
Yes, that's a great.
Prior to that, we'll have 2 more presentations. It might be, yeah.
Yeah, you might have to scream it.
And so we'll try to get started again. I'll be the stern taskmaster here. I'm going to be a god awful wind. Sit down, please.
There you go.
Pretty please.
Take your seat.
Our next panel will be on Central Asia, and we have two experts here to speak with us. First off, yes, bienvenido.
Yeah, a little much.
Yes. Hello. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes, our panel prior to lunch will be on Turkey and Central Asia. We have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is our old friend, Colonel Robert Gibbs. Not that he's old, but he's been a friend of WAIS for many years and a close friend of mine for many years. I speak with him more on the telephone, I think, than with anyone else except maybe my mother. So Bob and I know each other very well. But Bob is an expert on energy policy and politics in Central Asia. He's spent a great deal of time in the region. Also is very knowledgeable on Turkey, and I must stress that it is thanks to Bob that we have our friend Yusuf Conley is here with us today from Ankara. So we're very excited to hear from Yusuf after Bob's talk. And Bob, we also know Bob popularly as probably the world's expert, or certainly WAIS world's expert on pipelines. So we learn a great deal. Pipelines are far more fascinating than you would ever think. And so and I've learned that from Bob. They're kind of a microcosm of a lot of the world's issues and problems and conflicts. So Bob, specifically you'll be talking about...
Well, the presentation was supposed to be Central Asia, petroleum, pipelines, and politics in Central Asia.
You can write.
No, I don't need to. I just need people to.
Okay. All right. Okay. Robert Gibbs.
Wow, gee, thank you. Hope you feel that way when we conclude here. Hope you feel this way when I conclude here. When we began this inquiry in 2009, I started it with an anecdote that John seems to love so much. And for those of you who don't know what it is, there's an old American recipe for rabbit stew. And the first direction for it is first catch a rabbit. And that's been sort of the theme through this, because the concept of Central Asia alone sort of broadens and expands and then contracts and expands. And it really goes from probably what you would call northwestern China all the way through Turkey, mainly because these are the areas that are Turkic speaking for the most part. Although in the area all the way through the 20th century, the lingua franca for travelers in that area was Court Persian, and it still is in Kyrgyzstan to a certain degree. But this is how we've lived, and things have happened in that part of the world. We've discussed how just about every empire in the world that was an empire, with the possible exception of the Incas and the Aztecs, has gone through this area, leaving some sort of influence to it on one way or another. If you're going to do that, I'm going to have this. Hey, I'm on these meds, and if I start to stutter, just throw a rock and I'll jump out of it. The area we're talking about was taken over by the communists in the 1920s, completely, and in a very violent way. It's always had a violent history anyway, and these people and Stalin had drawn up at least 6 maps for the countries, especially for Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. He drew up all these, I think there are 6 maps that he drew, causing confusion in an area of vague and expanding boundaries with an even vaguer map, and of course the everlasting boundary disputes which go on to this very day as a result. A few months, however, can change the world. Last October, this paper and presentation would have been entirely different from the one I'm presenting to you today. The reason for that being is the obvious one, is a collapse of oil prices. You got to remember that last year, oil was around over $100 a barrel, probably 116 around there, and natural gas was going for around $400 per 1,000 cubic meters. Now natural oil is around $45 plus or minus. Natural gas is around $223 per 1,000 cubic meters. And this has impacted not just drivers, which we're all happy for this because we get cheaper fuel. But if you're a petrol economy, this is devastating. And most countries that are petrol economies are hit dramatically. Even, for example, Saudi Arabia has had to cut 10% out of their budget this year. I mean, to us, that's not, hey, but that's a massive amount for them. And they've had to borrow money on the exchange to cover other debts. And we'll get into other things that they're doing to get around later. Countries like Mexico and Brazil, for some reason, I don't understand how a country awash in petroleum can drive themselves into bankruptcy, but they managed it. I mean, Brazil is like 16 billion in debt for some reason. I don't understand it. Venezuela, for example, it cost them over $100 a barrel. They have very dirty oil, as we explained last time. And it's very expensive for them they have to refine it about 3 times. They have to process it and then refine it and then refine it again, plus transportation. And they're buying oil from Algeria because it's cheaper for them to buy this oil from Algeria than to pump it out of their own ground. That's how much this crash has hurt. Yeah, it's hurt companies here, but it's in countries like this really hurts. And as we will see, one country that's really hurt by this is going to be Russia. Russia has one of the largest deposits of energy in the world rather, and they are devastated. 40 to 50% of their economy is based upon hydrocarbon energy. As a matter of fact, if you remember at our last meeting in Adrian, I pointed out that there was an economist whose name I can't remember right now. I can look it up because I have it someplace in my notes, who was one of the top Kremlin economists. I mean, we're not talking just some guy who wrote a book. We're talking one of their top economists. Said that the Russian economy is in a basket case, and the only thing and it's on life support, and the only thing keeping it alive were 2 tubes, one called Rosneft and the other called Gazprom, which are the 2 energy companies owned by the Russian government. And right now, if 40 or 50% of your economy is hit, that means your whole economy is hit. It's one of the things that they're struggling with now. And right now, the whole energy business, because of this, is in turmoil. We have wells that are, just to even hold the price, a lot of producers are stopping to pump certain wells. The operating wells are decreasing in the US, for example. But the problem with oil and oil companies is, and with oil countries, petroleum economies, is they have to sell oil to survive. People who need this energy have to buy it, but right now this is a buyer's market, if you will. That in the short haul, for example, in the US, states like Oklahoma, California, West Texas, Intermediate, transportation and short haul have saved both their fracking and their enhanced oil recovery projects to a point where this isn't hitting them as much as it could have. In the Bakken, it's strange, but even there, both in the Bakken fields, which are fracking fields, and in the Permian fields, which are also fracking, they've got the cost down to $28 to $34 a barrel. It has forced them to enter into other efficiencies just to stay afloat because they have to sell oil. They have to meet their operating costs and newer capital costs. And the fun part of all this is, and this is where we come to our little map here, is that oil is where you find it. It's an old argument in saying in the oil business. And unfortunately, as we stated before, energy, gas, and oil in Central Asia is unfortunately gas and oil located in Central Asia. Because if you look at the map, our map here, if you, like Kazakhstan, has to go through at least 2 countries to get its oil to market, unless it sells to Russia. All the other countries have at least 1, if not 2 or more countries that they have to run pipelines through or a train through, which is more inefficient, by the way, and has more hazardous, simply because of the geography of where they are. And that's their burden. It always has been. You must remember that when we were talking about this at Adrian, the Central Asia was looked upon as the new El Dorado for energy. It was there. It was going to save the world. And you must remember also that around 2005 and 2012, the world was supposed to run out of energy between 2015 and 2035. And that in 2015, they were predicting at that time, and as we saw at Adrian, probably $500 a barrel oil. Not happening, and not for a while yet. Because aside from all the other problems that producers have, there's all kinds of oil coming on the market. There's something that, for my British friends, they'll probably have a heart attack with this, called the Gatwick Gusher, which in Surrey, and if you know Surrey in England, I mean the idea that this is going to be the oil producing area, that Texas and Oklahoma of England, is almost unfathomable to them probably. But it is true. And then there's also Argentina, and these are just a few. Right off, just before this, last month, they discovered massive deposits of oil and gas off the coast of Egypt and off the coast of Israel. All these are going to have geopolitical impacts throughout both, not just the region, but throughout the world. And it's going to also impact the world of selling energy. Because remember, the whole thing, if you've got an energy company, you have to sell energy. If you own oil, you have to sell the oil. If you have gas, you have to sell gas. When there's a little bit of competition, no competition at all, no problem. But now you're getting newer players coming into this game, and it's not fun for both companies and countries. Then there's the recent downturn in the economy in China, which was basically one of the big boosters of the energy boom of selling more energy, and they've had a big downturn. Now, as a result, this is going to impact all sorts of what the oil industry calls E&P, which is exploration and production of oil throughout the world, because you've got to remember, and we'll get a little bit into this later, China is developing oil all over the planet, in Africa, in Latin America, and this is all affecting them. But it also affects their investments in this, because they don't have as much to invest. And so that's where we are with that. And to maintain, for most petrol economies to maintain themselves, they've had to offer premiums. At one time, we talked about the different ways you buy oil. You've got the spot market, you've got the OPEC basket, you've got the WTI, West Texas Intermediate sales, you've got what we call the spot market and the open market. Now today, ships going around, or at one time ships going around loaded with oil, waiting for someone to bid on the oil, and they would go there. I mean, within reason. Now, countries like Saudi Arabia are literally offering premiums to, say, China and India, saying, hey, you buy our oil, we'll give you a kickback of $2 for every barrel and free transportation. I mean, this is how bad it is for even the Saudis. Okay? And they're the cheapest to get. So anyway, and Russia, for example, is dipping into its currency reserves as a result. And further, and I'm sure Cameron can talk a little bit more about this later, this is the first time in history. You've got to remember that this is such a geopolitical change that the state-run companies, Rosneft and Gazprom, are hurting economically. This was something, at least last year, was totally unthinkable. I mean, they were awash in cash and money, and everything was going in, and life was good. And now, because of inefficiencies and that are becoming glaring in their production and overspending in certain areas, they're hurting. And anyway, in Central Asia, this is the worst time for their development. It's devastating, as a matter of fact, especially for countries like Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Because in a sense, this new El Dorado has had almost all their proposed and prospective pipelines put on what the oil industry calls under review, which is mean we're shutting it down for a while because we're not going to invest the cash. But basically, it's all under review. Throughout, aside from the instability of their borders and the geographical challenges of getting its oil and gas to market, which there are considerable, Central Asia has the real problems in that due to politics in the area and amongst the border states. And we must add all of a sudden to this economics, because last year economics wasn't really a big thing. As I say, remember we're talking $100 oil here. And even though it cost them almost 3 times as much to get their oil out to market, you got to process it and ship it and get it passed and pay for the pipelines and all this other stuff. It was rather expensive, but they were making lots of money from it. Now they're not even breaking even. It's sad. But as I said, by 2015 now and to 2035, we're supposed to be almost out of oil. And now we're finding even more oil, not just fracking and not just enhanced oil recovery. We're finding new sources of energy. And previously, it was more politics than economics that Russia used, for example, to impose their will upon the EU. They wanted to maintain, did everything they could to maintain their monopoly, practically, of energy in the EU. And with the exception of Britain and Norway, this was true. Practically every country in the EU or Europe depended upon completely, some almost 100%, Russia for its gas, natural gas, and a significant portion of its oil. That's why we predicted there would be some sort of weirdness going on with the Ukraine back when we were at Adrian, and sure enough, the Russians did their thing, pretending they really didn't do it. But they're trying to maintain their monopoly there. Then there's also the explosions of the pipeline in Turkmenistan to maintain their price control over Turkmenistan. They're using the politics up until recently and economics to enforce their will. Russia is prodding Georgia. It's a surety trying to, and most assuredly, it's trying to collapse and did collapse the Tapai pipeline, which, by the way, is really a pipe dream. That people every once in a while bring up the Tapai pipeline, which is nothing more than, if you look here, the Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. Now, if you think about it, you got a pipeline going through Afghanistan. Fantastic. Okay? You got a pipeline going through northern Pakistan. Another fantastic idea. And then you've got a pipeline going to India. Now, aside from the problems of Afghanistan and Pakistan, is India going to trust Pakistan to actually deliver the gas that they're buying? It's always been a pipe dream. But back in the 90s, when I first started into this insane world, I forget, I think it was ExxonMobil, but John's sister could probably correct me, who was the prime mover of the Tapai pipeline at the time, thinking it was such a great idea, brought the Taliban to Houston and offered them $100 million to protect this pipeline. But you got to remember, this is good old days of good priced oil. You know, I mean, it wasn't like, cheap oil or something in gas. And India was going to pay any price practically for the gas once it got there. This, obviously, as you probably noticed, didn't work. Too bad. But that's the way life is. But this really is a true pipeline. And by the way, Turkmenistan and all the countries got together last month and decided to put it on life support and dig it up again, but nobody takes it seriously because nobody's investing in it. They're just investing in having a party somewhere to talk about it. And I might add that, anyway, so up until November of this year, last November. Money was no object. The whole idea of the second pipeline, the Baltic pipeline, what is it, a Blue Stream or is it a Nord Stream 2 going into Europe was a done deal. Everybody was happy and it was going to really happen. Not so much anymore.
South Stream.
Pardon?
South Stream.
No, South Stream's dead.
Oh.
South Stream was always a political pawn, John and I wrote that several times in this, but if you hadn't read it, but South Stream was never a reality.
What was the path of South Stream?
South Stream was supposed to go from Russia through Europe along the Black Sea here. This was before they invaded Sevastopol, but and then when they did, it was supposed to go along, and it was the one where Eugenio, whatever his last name is, complained that complained that
He sends his regards.
that
He may be watching, Eugenio.
okay, hi, Eugenio. Anyway, the thing was is that this pipeline, South Stream pipeline, was supposed to have given Italy $10 billion because it's a firm there. Actually, the firm only had a $2 billion contract, and it wasn't really. They're going to make just as much with TANAP as we're going to go through with the Trans-Anatolian pipeline as we're talking about later, and it'll be just as much. Anyway, that you've got to remember that for oil companies, again, they have to sell it, but they do have production costs. Land-based, the cheapest land-based oil field, oil drilling, is going to cost you around $3 to $4 million. If you go out into the ocean, you're looking at billions with a B dollars. And that's why it's all very expensive. Shell just pulled out of the American Arctic off the coast of Alaska, mainly because of cost. And they've already spent $7 billion on this project. And they have another $2 they have to cover. So that's $9 billion on something that they're not going to look at until about 2030 or so, because of conditions in the oil business. And that's just one thing. Anyway, it's not just exploration and production. You've got to remember there is, and this is the important thing again for Central Asia in particular, the transportation of the oil. Now, you dig oil out of the ground, as we told you in Adrian, the oil is dirty. It's not coming out clean. You have to process it, or no pipeline company is going to allow you to ship your oil through if it's dirty. Same thing with gas. You have to take all the water and other things out of the natural gas because it comes up significant water in it, and it's a very expensive process. So you have that cost, those costs. And by the way, the other reason is no refinery. If you're shipping oil to a refinery, no refinery is going to allow you to ship. They're not going to pay, for example, $45 a barrel of oil, or back in those days, $100 a barrel, for oil that's only 60% oil and the rest is water and gas and all kinds of expendables. They're going to pay for the oil. And there's all these agreements that people enter into because of this. That another thing that's under review because of the downturn of oil, Russia and China had signed a $400 billion with a B dollar contract, well, kind of a contract, agreement, let's put it that way, for both gas and oil from Yamal and Siberia to be shipped to China. This again is under review, and the $25 billion with the B dollars that the Chinese presumably gave the Russians to start this project and to build the pipeline has somehow disappeared. I mean, you've got to love the oil company for that. It's nobody will say what happened to that $25 billion or if it was even paid. But and there's also one of the things here, and it's not on our map here, but that's okay. On the bottom of Pakistan is the town of Gurdwara. And the Chinese had this whole idea of building a combination road, railroad, and pipeline. And remember, the Chinese just had a train go from Peking to Madrid just, last month, I think it was, the first time. So, they're big on this train business. and an energy pipeline for both gas and oil. Now, the fun part of this is, if you don't notice it, and you don't see it all on this map, it's going to go through Pakistan. Now, aside from the fact that the economic challenges are fantastic, I mean, the geographic challenge and the technological challenges of the mountains and all the other crap they're going to go through are enormous. But the instability of Pakistan is incredible. And it's going through some of the most incredibly unstable areas of Pakistan. All of these difficulties are some real economic problems in China. And the idea is the cost of all this is, guess what? Rising almost geometrically. So it's on review again, as we say. And I think the Chinese, I really believe probably in another 5 to 10 years, they will come back to this idea, unless something else happens in their equation, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. Anyway, because John's giving me my thing there, that's going by the boards as we are. Then there's the one thing, and this, I'm sorry, John, but this is kind of important.
Absolutely.
Which is done here is that we have new players as a result of this. Now you got to remember, Iran is re-entering the world of selling oil more, but they're also looking at pipelines from Iran to Pakistan, Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline, which is basically economically doable, but again, going through some very strange countries. The other thing that the Iranians are looking at is having a pipeline run from the South Pars gas fields to Baku in Azerbaijan and on to Europe. So it's a good deal for them. But the problem with this is, A, the Azeris really don't like the Iranians. I mean, sorry. And second, the other thing is, this might and could kill the Turkmenistan pipeline and Kazakhstan pipelines going under the Caspian, which will stop anybody really taking seriously the status of the Caspian Sea. And if you remember the last time we talked about this, the Caspian Sea, is it a sea or a lake? And believe me, to these people, it means a lot of different things. Now, John's giving me a signal here, so I'm just going to make this really quick. And you got to remember, this is great game country. And the two players coming out of the great game on this are going to be Russia and China. And they're going to compete both as buyer and seller. The Chinese want reliable energy, and the only way they can really count on it is if they control it. And that means there's going to be some challenges probably to Russian Siberia that's already happening in Mongolia, and it'll probably increase more in places like Turkmenistan and possibly Kazakhstan. What I'm really trying to say in all this is like, and also the Chinese, I have to add this, they're very smart in how they do things. I mean, they really are. Unlike the Russians who probe with the bayonet all the time. I mean, it's like every 4 to 6 months, the border guards in Abkhazia, in Abkhazia in Georgia, move the border another 100 meters or so. Or if the oil gets below $40 a barrel. And if you look at this, and very seriously, one of the big things is, I've always wondered why Georgia was such a pain in the ass to the Russians. But if you look at it geopolitically, it is a choke point, an absolute total choke point for any energy coming out of Central Asia. But the reality of all this is that, well, I'm just going to go and conclude this by adding here. To this end, I would only add that in Central Asia and energy pipelines, the world is in total chaos. It really, truly is. The number of projects that are not going to happen, that people still talk about and have meetings over, is limitless. But it is a dream world of pipeline fantasies in many ways, and a world that will probably be with us for quite some time. The sad part to me is that this is going to reduce Central Asia into what it once was long ago, irrelevance. No one will care. Russia will do with them as she wants. China may do something. India may do something. Iran may do something. And no one will care. People will wring their hands. People will wring their hands and say, gee, that's too bad, but nothing will be done. And I want to conclude by, with apologies, with the geopolitical instability, and this is a world where once we enter of pipelines, politics, and petroleum in Central Asia, you feel like you've been chased down a rabbit hole, okay? And with apologies to Grace Slick and, for you, and C.S. Lewis, I feel like I've been suckered into this by a hookah-smoking caterpillar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. They say if you really want to understand what's going on in the world, follow the money. And Bob has taught us that really pipelines are a metaphor for much of the world's condition. And I've learned a great deal. I'm going to try to keep it tight. I see we have a number of questions. I saw Randy and then Anthony and then the third person, General Sullivan. And then, so Randy.
Okay, Randy.
Okay, this has to do with Russia. And
I'm sorry?
this has to do with Russia and hydraulic fracking.
Right.
We know historically that in 1966 exactly, the Soviet Union used a 30-kiloton nuclear bomb.
And how did that work, by the way?
It worked. They had 5 simultaneous blowouts on gas wells near Uzbekistan.
Right.
And they fought with it traditional methods of putting it, squelching the fire.
You didn't end this. This thing blew up and went into a 2-year fire.
And so they used a 30-kiloton bomb down a 20,000-foot hole, and it put out the fire.
Right.
Okay, so that's 1966. Earlier this year in April, the U.S. Geological, whatever it's called, announced that there was a 6.8 magnitude earthquake near the border of Russia where it meets with Belarus.
Right.
It was on their website for 20 minutes, and it's picked up by Reuters. And 20 minutes later, the website was wiped. With no, the USGA came out and said we mislocated the earthquake at 700 miles away near Greenland. Nobody ever explained it. And then I saw a report recently that they might be using nuclear bombs to frack gas wells. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I've heard rumors. I didn't want to get into that because the sad part for the Russians is, and with all due respect to Cameron and everybody, there's no crazy thing that you can say about the Russians that people won't at least give it some credence. The one that Randy is talking about is there's a big rumor that in the Yamal Peninsula up in the Arctic, they set a bunch of small nukes about 20,000 feet in the ground to frack and to bring up all the gas. Unfortunately, all they've done was start a 2-year fire, and they're melting the ice cap or the tundra and all kinds of weird things. But whether it happened or not, I cannot say. That's why I didn't bring it here, because I cannot confirm it. But it sounds like something they would do because they've done other wacky things. And if you knew how they run their oil fields and things, I could show you pictures that would give you a heart attack of what people were doing in their oil fields to get the oil out of the ground. I mean, people swimming in oil up to their chest to move it along to a pipe. Yeah. And this was like 10 years ago, or back in the Soviet age. So I guess they're still doing it. I don't know. But I mean, these things happen. I mean, John talks about minimum wage survival. These people are living on survival. But I mean, the thing is that I can't say. It's just that I've read, I've seen, and it may be one big internet conspiracy, or it's the reality. I don't know. Anyway.
That would give, fracking a new name.
Okay, John.
Anthony D'Agostino.
Okay, Anthony.
I was just going to ask you about all the things that they say about how this all started with the Saudis lowering the price of the United States lobbying. Do you have anything to add to all of this?
Well, basically, right now, the Saudis did lower their price initially. Well, they went along with the price it wasn't so much the price, they maintained their production. And that was to try to destroy our fracking industry, which they didn't do because, I mean, regardless of what you think about America, I mean, sometimes we do get rather innovative. And we brought the price of getting a barrel of fracked oil from $50 to $20-something in a very short time.
Yeah, how do they do that?
Basically something called walking oil wells, oil rigs, I'm sorry. It's a great technology. I could explain it to you offline. It's fun. Enhanced oil recovery, which is different methods and different recirculating things. It's reusing things. It's a whole different way of doing it. And it is fantastic. I mean, if any of you ever have a chance to find out how oil is extracted and transported, it is a fascinating kind of story. Really, it is. But that's basically the thing. But as far as the Saudis go, for example, the Venezuelans and other countries are really mad at them because they wanted them to cut production, but they wouldn't, because I say they're having this war with our fracking industry. And by the way, with that $200 to $1 million a barrel of excess Iranian oil hitting the market soon, plus what's going to come from wherever, it's going to get really a real fun ride. John.
Wonderful. No, General.
Oh, I'm sorry.
First, General Michael Sullivan.
Yeah, but
Hey, I'm a colonel. He's a general. Wait.
Pulling rank on you.
That's right.
China. Do
Okay.
they have any natural resources, underground, gas or oil?
That's something that I couldn't get to because somebody cut me short. I won't mention names here. But China is in the infancy of its fracking because in the western deserts and a few other places, there's a reticence there that I don't understand to go into fracking. And it's more cultural and bureaucratic than it is private industry or something. And this is a very expensive operation, so a government has to undertake it, or a very big company, and big companies in China, energy companies, are hurting, and so I'm not sure they're ready to invest in it. But there is great suspicions that in Western China and in the desert areas in particular, there is a lot of gas and a lot of oil. But that's, we don't know.
Last question will be John Torok.
So there are efforts and movements now to keep fossil fuels in the ground because of the fear of the change of climate. There's going to be big mobilizations across the US and the world in November leading up to the climate conference in Paris in December. Would you care to comment on
Well,
what, if any, effect this
I'm
stuff
glad you gave me forewarning so I can cheer them on. Look, whether, and this is like in Seattle, we had these activists trying to keep Shell out of there and everything. And the thing is, they don't understand oil. They don't understand the world they live in. Everything just about in this room, your cell phones, your watches, your clothes, the chairs you're sitting on, is made from oil. We're an oil-based economy, not just from, and that's why the changes affect everybody in the park. Just about everything you touch, smell, and feel has some connection to oil, up to and including your food, for God's sakes, and things, petrochemicals for fertilizers and things. And right now they're trying to figure out what to do with methane. There's all kinds of, you find out what to do with methane, you're rich, you get a good one going. Okay, you're going to have this. I mean, and at this conference, I guarantee you, they're going to say, we're going to save the world is going to be saved, and we're all happy, and we're all going to go home and do what we want. I mean, so save your time and breath, go have an ice cream bar, go to the beach that day, because it isn't going to do anything. I mean, that's my opinion. But I mean, I don't, it's, part of it is because most people, and I would say many here, don't realize how much oil is affecting your life. I mean, right now, we got a guy spending, I think, $8 billion in Lake Charles, Louisiana, to convert natural gas into diesel fuel, something the Germans did during the WWII. I mean, it's weird, But hey, if it works, this guy's rich because it's cheaper. I mean, I'm just saying these are the things that are going on in this world. I got.
My question is about the price of oil going down. Does it have anything to do with trying to break the financial support of ISIS?
No. I look. If you told me tomorrow oil went up to $100 a barrel, I would not be absolutely shocked. I would be a little surprised. But if you told me it dropped down to 25, I wouldn't be shocked either. I mean, it's that kind of a world. And as far as ISIL is concerned, this is something Joseph and I have talked about many times. Yeah, they're shipping out oil at about $12 to $20 a barrel. I mean, it's like Canada. Right now, when oil hit $45, Canada was selling its oil at about $27 to $25 a barrel because of the same problem they have in Central Asia. They have to get it someplace, and that's a costly affair. But as far as ISIL goes, they're selling oil, but they're selling it at a very cheap discount.
So my question is, if they want to go wipe out ISIL, why not give oil free and then ISIL will go in and they can...
No, because they got other things they can do. They got extortion and robbery and bank robbery, and that's not their only source of income. But probably Saudi princes are giving them money too. And but anyway, anybody else? Just because I thought I saw a hand up over here.
I just had a quick question. You mentioned 2 Mediterranean fields off Israel and Egypt.
Yeah.
How deep are they?
Not very as far as oil or gas goes. I mean, I think you're looking at 3,000. I'm not sure.
Something like that.
It's what it is. It's changing the whole equation in the Middle East because you've got to remember this. I forget the name of both fields for some reason. It's the Meds thing. That the field off of Israel was discovered last year, and Egypt was signing contracts with Israel to supply gas to them.
Latvian field.
Pardon?
Latvian.
That's it. Well, just 2 months ago, the ENI, the Italian company, discovered gas off the coast of Egypt, even bigger than the deposit off of Israel. So it's kind of like it's a done deal. We're not going to exactly go along with this. We're going to stick with our own and sell it to whomever. But I mean, the point is, and Eugenio should be happy with this, one of the great transfer points for Mediterranean gas in particular is going to be in Italy. Just like the the only oil pipeline still being worked on is a Trans-Anatolian pipeline, which goes from Baku on the Caspian through Turkey to the Bulgarian border, where a Nabucco short, small pipeline takes over. Then they go the Trans-Adriatic, they go across Greece and then into Italy, and then from there to
That's a product
Europe.
pipeline.
What?
That's a product. That's a oil pipeline.
It's a gas pipeline.
Gas pipeline.
It can be an oil pipeline later, but right now it's a gas pipeline, and that's why Iran wants to join it with its South Pars field, which is a very nasty field, to sell gas. But if they do that, they're going to screw up Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan's ability to sell, and those 2 countries only have one real customer for their gas, and that'll be China. Yes? I can't hear you.
They are building a pipeline in Iran for the gas in Turkmenistan.
To where?
Gas in Turkey.
Oh, that's already there. There's a pipeline from Turkmenistan. 10% of gas. It's one of the few that broke. We allowed to break the sanctions. That goes from Turkmenistan to Iran. About 10% of Turkmenistan's gas goes through there.
All right, thank you guys.
Listen, all right, now it is my pleasure, very seriously, it is my total pleasure to introduce to you folks someone who's new to this organization, or relatively so to the organization and to our meeting, is Joseph Connolly. I've known Joseph for about 20 years now, close to that. He has this delightful daughter that used to run around, and now she's a big banker in Holland, and God knows what else she's doing. But I wanted to say, because I count myself very fortunate that he calls me a friend. Because truly he is, quite possibly, if you knew his background and what he is up against in Turkey as a publisher and editor of a very important newspaper, one of the most courageous men I have ever met. And I say that as somebody who's led troops into battle and into combat. And I'm just saying that without guns and arms, he is by daily someone you can admire and respect. And for all his accomplishments, which is a publisher of an English-speaking newspaper and as a publisher in Turkey, the things he has faced in his life have been monumental. And I just want to say, truly, he is one of the most courageous and intelligent men I have ever known, even if somebody says wrong.
Bio, you